everyone, it's Moose, and thank you so much for joining me back here. Today I want to do a bit of a different kind of video than what I normally do here on my channel. I am a Christian. I don't try to force it on other people by any means here on my channel, but it is something that's very close to me, very close to my heart, and the biggest part of who I am. So I do want to talk about some ways that I get more out of my Bible reading. The Bible is the only book that I make sure to read every single day. This is a booktube channel, so my videos revolve around books, but this is the only book that I read absolutely every single day, whereas some of the other books, most of the other books that I talk about, I only read at my leisure whenever I have time, but I make time to read my Bible, which I guess could maybe be the first thing we talk about. This isn't like a 10 tips to read more. This is just how I get more out of my Bible reading. Because it can be difficult, I think. I feel like all Christians go through this, myself included, where you kind of just maybe make an effort to read the Bible, but you're just reading it passively and not really trying to analyze it or apply it to your own life, or think about how you can apply it to your own life. So these are just some things that I have been doing, my husband and I have actually been doing together to help us get more out of our Bible reading. And so hopefully, if you're maybe struggling with that a little bit, these can help you too. So like I previously mentioned very briefly, number one, just make time to read your Bible. Set aside time and make sure that it's a priority. My husband and I read every night before bed. We put our son to bed. He has a set bedtime, and then we read after he's gone to bed, and we have that time to kind of dedicate to it where we're not distracted by taking care of him or what's going on around us, the TV, our phones, whatever. We set aside time, we read the Bible before bedtime, and we read it together, which could also be another little helpful thing. If there is someone that you can read with, it is very, very helpful, or has been to myself and my husband, to talk through it with somebody else. Every night we sit down, we read. We don't necessarily read the same chapter, but once we finish with our chapter, we discuss it with each other. We tell each other what the chapter was about, what we took away from it. If we have questions, we talk to each other about it and maybe get a different perspective from it. We talk about maybe how it applies to the life that we're living together, or maybe things that are going on in the world right now. We just discuss it with each other, which I think is important. So if you have somebody in your life that you can talk to about what you're reading, it can be very, very helpful. Another thing that can be helpful is checking out different translations of the Bible. This is my Bible. I use, the She Reads Truth Bible? Is that the name of it? It's a CSB Bible. It's a Christian Standard Bible. Now, I have used a bunch of different translations. I picked this one for a couple of different reasons, mainly because it has extra stuff within it. One, I wanted a journaling Bible, which I'll get into here in a second. So it's got space on the edges to write on and stuff like that. But this one also has different resources and stuff within it. At the beginning of each book, it tells you background knowledge. It tells you background knowledge about when it was written, what was going on in the world at the time when it was written. I am a firm believer that historical context can really give you a different perspective when it comes to reading anything, not just your Bible, but any works. So I did like that it included that. And it's also got kind of devotionals throughout it that I really liked. So you read a chapter and it'll give you some different takeaways and stuff from it, which I really liked as well. Those are probably the two biggest reasons I chose this Bible. I wanted the devotionals and I wanted a journaling Bible. That's what I wanted. And CSB to me is easy to understand. It's basically just regular English. I know there are some people out there who are very picky about their translations, and if that is the case for you, that's fine. I have just found that using different translations can sometimes be helpful, especially when it is translated into modern English where it is easier to understand. I use a CSB. My husband I think he uses an NIV, a New International Version, which is similar to the CSB. It's just in modern English. So if you can find a translation that works for you, that you think is easier to understand, I definitely think it could help you get more out of your reading, because if you're sitting there and you're trying to read, say, the King James Version, where it's got the these and the thous, it can kind of detract sometimes, where you're more focused on getting through that language rather than what it's actually trying to tell you. So sometimes picking a different translation that works a little better can be helpful. Now, I did mention that mine is a journaling Bible. My husband also uses a journaling Bible. So as we read through, we write down thoughts and stuff that we have. It can be pretty much anything. Sometimes I write about, if I read something that I feel I'm struggling with, I'll tell myself I need to work on this. A big one is patience for me. I find a lot of the verses that I do that with revolve around patience. Just reminding myself to be patient, to have patience, to pray for patience. I'll write that note sometimes. Sometimes I will make notes about questions that I have. If I read something and I don't really understand what it's trying to tell me, I'll mark it or write a question beside of it. I'll discuss it with my husband. We'll go back and we'll look it up. We'll talk about it, that sort of thing. I write questions, maybe. I highlight things that I want to remember. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that I'm struggling with in that moment, but if I read something about God being faithful, I'll highlight it and mark a note out on the side that God is faithful, just to remind myself of that, because sometimes it can be hard to remember, or God is patient, or God is merciful, whatever it may be. I'll make notes about what I notice while reading. If I am reading through a section that I am finding myself struggling a little bit in terms of understanding, I'll sometimes read it section by section and kind of paraphrase out to the side. This is especially helpful in the Old Testament for me, where there are a lot of things happening all in one chapter. So that can be helpful to kind of paraphrase it into your own words and kind of actually think about what's happening to make sure you understand. Something my husband does a lot, which I think is very helpful, is when he's reading in the New Testament, specifically the Gospels, when he's reading through all of the parables, he likes to make notes and kind of annotate what the parable represents in real life, what Jesus is trying to tell us, that sort of thing. Again, just kind of thinking through what you just read and what it actually means, and marking that as your notes. All of this just to say the general thing, writing down your thoughts, your feelings, other things as you're reading can be very, very helpful. You don't have to have a journaling Bible for this. It's very helpful too. I personally enjoy it, having that space out on the side to write directly beside whatever it is I'm referring to. Not necessary at all. Before I had this, I read out of a King James Version Bible that my husband made for me. He tabbed it. I'll go get it. Hold on. Here is my tabbed version that I used to read out of. I made my husband one of these, and so he made me one as well. It's just a thing where you pick different topics and color coordinate those topics. And so strength is orange. So if I feel like I need a Bible verse referring to strength, I open an orange tab, I find the orange highlight, and it'll give me something about strength. Very helpful, and I really enjoyed it. But in saying that, this is not a journaling Bible by any means. It is a strictly old King James Version with I think this is a large print, but with everything very close together, the two columns. There's not a whole lot of space to write in here. So what I did is, when I used to read out of this one, I had a notebook that I would write whatever chapter I was reading or verse or whatever, as the title kind of, and then write my thoughts beneath it. So if you don't have a journaling Bible, it's not absolutely a necessity to get more out of your reading. You can still make notes in a different place that can be very helpful. I also mentioned that sometimes we have questions, and I think that's okay. Again, it can be helpful to have someone you talk to if you have those kinds of questions. But sometimes my husband and I, we look at each other, we say, hey, like, this is something I had a question about, and my husband might not have an answer for that either, and so we go look it up together. We go search for the answer, which is something that can also be helpful. Don't be afraid to utilize your resources, whether it be the internet, whether it be if you go to church, you could ask your pastor or maybe another church member that you go there with. My husband and I usually use the internet just because we kind of want the answer in that moment while we're thinking about it and discussing it. And like I say, we usually read later at night, so we usually use the internet, but don't be afraid to utilize your resources if you have a question. It can be very helpful and help you understand what you're reading a little bit more. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we do. I'm sure there is, but for now, I think that's enough. Again, this is not a video to tell you how you should read your Bible by any means. Whatever works for you, you do that. These are just some things that my husband and I have started doing together that I find very, very helpful. We were going through kind of a slump there for a little bit where we were setting aside that time and we were reading every night, but we would read out loud to each other. So we would read a chapter together and we would take turns. So one night I would read the chapter out loud for both of us, and then the next night he would read a chapter out loud for both of us. And it was just becoming kind of a passive ordeal where we just sat and we read and didn't really get a whole lot out of it. We both agreed that this is way better. This is way more beneficial to both of us, even if we don't read the same chapter, which we're not since we've started doing this. I'm reading through Genesis. My husband is reading through one of the Gospels. I think it might be Matthew, which I actually think is helpful because we're able to talk about two different things every night. And if we have a question, we can flip back to whatever verse we're referring to and talk about it together. So there you go. Those are some ways and some things that have helped me get more out of my Bible reading in terms of just having a deeper understanding and finding ways that I can apply what I read to my actual life to be more Christ-like. And I think it's important to emphasize Christ-like. I feel like a lot of the times we look at other Christians and compare ourselves to other Christians, but that's not what we're called to do. We're called to be like Christ, not like each other, which is a big discussion that my husband and I have kind of been coming back to, it seems like, as we've been reading through, especially since he's reading through the Gospels right now, and we're talking a lot about who Jesus was and what he did and that kind of stuff. It's been very helpful. All of these things together, just collectively, I feel like I'm getting a lot more out of my Bible reading here lately than I have in a long while. So if you have been struggling with that as well, hopefully some of these things can help you too. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe down below and leave a comment. Let me know some things that maybe you do that I haven't mentioned that help you with your Bible reading. I'm always open to just learning new ways to get more out of it. You know what I'm saying? You guys are awesome. I'm so thankful for you. And we will meet back here next time, guys. See you.